Happy First Friday, sexy first Friday of the month. Today we are talking about the third in our series, Enneagram 7s. And I see that Nikki has joined, and let's see if we can get her in okay. All right, go live. I'm accepting both of them. Okay, there's Sam. Now let's see if we can get Nikki in here. Oh, it's doing that thing, Sam, where it like says, oh, there we go. Yay! 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 It finally worked. We're all here. I was telling Nikki when we first, I was like, this is why we come early. Because sometimes things don't go as smoothly as we want. Well, it is August, the first Friday of August, which I think is actually August 2nd. I almost said August 1st, but it's not August 1st today. So we are back for episode 3 of our Type and Sexuality series. And we have Nikki with us today. And we thought that, hi, Nikki, we're so happy that you're able to join us. And we're just going to introduce ourselves a little bit and then have Nikki introduce herself. I know most of you already know Sam and I, but every once in a while we get new people on here. So we still just give quick introductions of ourselves as well. My name is Lyndsey. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a certified sex therapist, an IA accredited professional. I am out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I specialize in relationships and sexuality in my private practice. So that's a little bit about me. Oh, Enneagram type. I always forget to tell people my Enneagram type. So I am an Enneagram 9. I am social dominant instinct, and then I have sexual instinct in the repressed position. So we'll have Sam introduce herself, and then we'll have Nikki talk a little bit about who she is.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you, Nikki. I'm Dr. Sam E Greenberg. I'm a sexuality researcher and a Enneagram coach focused on sexuality and relationships. My doctoral research focused on the intersection of Enneagram type, instinct, and patterns of sexual desire, which we're going to talk about today because we talk about them for each type, the research. And my type is 5, and I have a sexual dominant instinct followed by social. So I have self-preservation and the repressed position. So Nikki, when you introduce yourself, make sure to include those details because we always forget to say those for people. Go ahead, Nikki.
You bet. Well, hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Nikki Meyers. I'm a certified Enneagram practitioner with my own practice, Pura Vida Coaching and Development, and I work one-on-one with folks, with couples, in corporations, and I'm part of the Enneagram Prison Project as a certified guide, helping people who are incarcerated understand themselves. I lead with a type 7, and let me tell you, it is not a shock to anybody once you get to know me. Specifically sexual 7, followed by social and self-preservation, repressed. I also want to share with everybody that I learned on this platform that I can't speak when somebody else is speaking, otherwise it warbles it, and that's going to be the most difficult thing in my entire life. So that's me. Hi.
Looks like you have some fans here, Nikki, in the comments.
My bestie, Anna. Hi, Anna.
So I will quickly just reintroduce our series, and then I'll let Lyndsey take it away with the 7 overview. So if you're new here, this is Sexy First Friday. Lyndsey and I do a episode of Instagram Live the first Friday of every month with a different Enneagram sexuality and relationships topic. And we've just a few months ago started our type series. So we started with 9 and 8 and now 7, and you can go back and find all these episodes in my Instagram stories or on either of our Instagrams. So we are here today to talk about type 7, sexuality and relationships. Lyndsey, do you want to start with like a clinical kind of picture of 7s, and then I'll do a research picture, and then we'll dive in with interviewing Nikki.
So one of the really interesting things with 7s in particular in therapy, so one of the things, like even before I get to the sexuality piece, is that they are my boppers in and out of therapy all the time. And so I can see Nikki, she's like, yeah. And what I find was really interesting is a lot of times what will happen is like when things get a little bit tough or we're going a little bit deep, it's like, bye. They'll be gone for a few months and then they'll pop back in. And it's very interesting, this, having been in practice now for 12 years, sort of this tendency that I see with sevens and earlier on. And so like, even those of you that are therapists or coaches on here, I used to think it was like about me, like maybe I'm not doing a good job, or maybe they don't feel connected to me. And what I realized is it has absolutely nothing to do with me most of the time. It's like, you hit the thing that I need to work on, and I'm not ready to do that. So I'm going to disappear for a few months, and then I'll pop back in when I'm ready. And then when you make it hard again, I'm going to pop out again, and I'll pop back in. But it is really a lot of this, besides self-preservation sevens, they'll stay a little bit longer, but my sexual instinct dominant sevens and the social sevens are kind of like in and out of therapy quite a bit. I think what's really interesting around sexuality for sevens in particular, like it is all about play, it is about fun, is it about adventure, and when you want to make it more serious, especially if sevens are more in a fixated state, they're like, what are you doing? Sex is not supposed to be serious. And that can be very hard for people that want more seriousness or more like deeper connection, sort of through the sexual act and things like that. Though you'll see a little bit of difference, of course, with instinct. Sexual instinct dominants are going to want a little bit more of that you and me sort of in that sexual experience. But even with that, sometimes what I can see is that sexual instinct dominant people can have a little bit harder time with monogamy in relationships. And so like they can be really connected with someone here, and then they go and they meet someone else somewhere else, and they're really connected there. And sometimes that can feel as if they're flirting or they're crossing boundaries or these types of things with other people when they're with partners. And that can be very confusing or frustrating, because it doesn't necessarily mean that they're into the other person. They're just like the sexual energy or the playfulness is here, and we're going to like move into that. And they can have, difficulty sometimes, like what are boundaries that are okay or not okay with that, right? And so that's a common thing that I will kind of have with that. I know Sam and I have talked about too, is maybe that kind of like, oh, sex is done, up and about, next to the next thing. I don't necessarily want to snuggle or cuddle or be close to you. And they're like, well, wait, this really thing just happened. Like, why don't you want to be close and connected to me as well? And so those are some of the things. But I think as far as what I think is great about sevens, they're usually up for anything. They're willing to try anything. They're very adventurous. Like nothing oftentimes feels like out there for them. Around sexuality, like, the buffet of sexual activity and behaviors you can do is available to them. And that's also very fun and playful and enjoyable. And so those are some of the things that I see with my sevens in therapy. Either of you can relate with your coaching clients or who you are. I kept seeing Nikki nodding.
Definitely. So I'll just do a quick like portrait of sevens in research, and then we can get in all the juicy stuff with Nikki, your personal life and coaching, whatever you want to share. But let's talk about sevens in research. So, in the research, sevens are in what we sometimes jokingly refer to as the sexual triad, which is 7, 8, and 4. So, in my research that I did, 4, 7s, and 8s were really at the top of a whole bunch of things that I measured: sexual desire, overall sexual desire high, solo sexual desire high. How frequently do I think about sex? A lot, for all three of those types. Sevens are normally second, with eights being the top. We talked about eights last month. So, for example, sevens are the second highest type on dyadic sexual desire, that is, desire to behave sexually with a partner. They're actually highest for solo sexual desire. Just, when we ask, how often do you want to behave, sexually with yourself? Sevens are like, a lot. Yeah, definitely. So the sevens are at the top of that. And they're, along with eights, the least comfortable going without sex. So eights are the least comfortable, sevens second least comfortable. We'd rather not have sexual dry spells as sevens. We also have a high responsiveness to visual proximity cues. That's, seeing someone hot, someone classy, someone important, someone famous. And also, interestingly, really high responsiveness to like traditional romantic sexual cues, like candlelight dinner, walk on the beach. That was contrary to my hypothesis. Sevens actually said that they love that stuff. Quite high sexual assertiveness, second to eights. And then finally, I want to point out sevens say that their pleasure is important as well as their partners more than any other type. So we have our twos, my partner's pleasure is more important than mine. We have a lot of the types in the middle on that. Sevens, they're not saying the partner's pleasure is not important. They do say it's important, but they're like, no, my pleasure is just as important. I'm not going to say the partner's pleasure is more important than mine. That's just not true. So that's a quick portrait of sevens in the sexuality research. Nikki, take it away with everything that we shared so far. What's resonating? What feels true to you?
Just about everything. So, which is my favorite part of these kinds of interactions, is just how validating it can feel, and when you're trying to navigate yourself. So I think the only thing, and probably because I've been married for we've been together for 15 years. I've been a serial monogamist. However, in some of my previous long-term relationships, I would exit them before we were formally exited and begin a new one. So that was the one thing. But with my husband, we're in a committed, loving relationship, and I have no desire to not be.
So that makes me think of subtype differences. Why don't we talk a little bit about that? Because our sexual sevens do have a little bit of a more romanticizing around the relationship. So what I've personally seen with sexual sevens that I've worked with is that there is more like monogamy. I'm going to do quotes, monogamy, but it's fast. It's like, I found the one, we're
Yes.
monogamous. It's everything. Okay. Oh, wait, no, that's over. Next one.
Bingo. My husband moved in after we were dating for 3 months. So
That's really fast. To this 9 social.
Yes, for many sexual dominant types, that wouldn't be, considered super fast. So, Lyndsey, what are your thoughts on subtype differences? Because we do see quite a bit noticeable difference between, for example, self-pres 7 and a sexual 7.
Well, I mean, I think, well, one thing going back to sexual sevens, oftentimes what I do see is like if they have sort of decided that the relationship's already over, but they haven't necessarily told their partner, they are oftentimes already starting the next relationship. And sometimes I wonder if it's, this is one of the thoughts that I've had, if it's also like, I don't have to deal with the unpleasantness, sort of like what 9s will do sometimes, that I can then just get the partner to sort of end the relationship. So it's sort of okay for me to move on to the next one. 9s can do something similar by detaching and withdrawing. And I really was wondering if this behavior that I've seen with clients in my office is like, I could tell that the sexual 7 or 7 was already kind of out of the relationship and was kind of having chronic infidelities or chronic affairs. I think kind of wanting their partner to end the relationship, and then the partner eventually did, but they don't themselves, sort of thing. So that was a really interesting, and I see Nikki nodding about that. Self-preservation 7s, this is one that you will see can be okay with some sexual dry spells, or having to be, pushed through context more. If things are not, what I've noticed a little bit with some of the self-preservation 7s I've had in my office is, especially if there is like unpleasantness kind of happening within the relationship, like anxiety around performance, around sexuality. Actually, I would think that all 7s would have some of this if there is like more conflict or discord in the relationship itself, sometimes not being able to perform. So like I've had men where it's like, I can't get an erection to perform the way that I want to sexually, or having to push through context a little bit more. But more often than not, I feel like the avoidance of sex in those particular circumstances has to do more with the performance than the desire to want to be sexual. So it's not like all these contexts are in play. It's like, I am having conflict with my partner, and then we have sex, and I can't maintain an erection, for instance, in a man's perspective, go from a man, and then so I avoid sexual encounters because I'm afraid that that's going to happen again, and so then we're not, right, and kind of doing other things. And self-preservation 7s are a little bit more apt to do that. Social 7s kind of are, I'm trying to think. Actually, I have not seen a whole lot of social 7s now that I think about it. I see mostly sexual and self-preservation 7s, so maybe they don't come into therapy.
Social 7s are going to have more of the giving stance that you would see from, say, like a 2. So sometimes social 7s will mistype as 2s. So even in the bedroom, they're going to be a little more 2-ish, like a little more what do you like? I'll do that. I'll just like give of myself to make you happy. But they're still going to be saying like, but my pleasure is important too. Do we want to dive into some of these questions we have for Nikki? We got lots of questions from followers for you. Um, what about starting with just a kind of a simple one? So someone was just asking about the difference between 8-wing and 6-wing. So let us know, your wing, and then like, have you noticed anything in particular in your sexual world, your sexual life that you think might be attributed to being a 7 with that particular wing?
Sure. I definitely identify with an 8-wing more strongly. And so I think when it comes to like taking charge, assertiveness, being in control, combined with like the fun sort of like almost how can I make, okay, this is going to sound terrible. How can I kind of scare my partner a little bit, right? Like, like pull over on the side of the road, but in a way that there's not an option to say no. but it's kind of like, let me prove to you that this is going to be really fun. Just let me lead kind of thing. So I would say that, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on questions if there's a lot. So you tell me if you want me to share more, but that's sort of how I lead in that space.
That's perfect. So just conversely, from a 6-wing, we would see more, of course, all 7s are playful, but we'd see more of a playful stance and more of a, like a childlike innocence kind of coming from the 7. Like 7 with an 8-wing is going to be like that stronger, more commanding, like let's do it. And then the 6-wing is going to be a little more less sure, because next month with 6s, we'll talk about like, 6s are really going to hedge their bets with sexuality. So with the strong 6-wing, you'd see a little more of like it's playful, but I'm not sure what you want. Let's play our way into figuring that out. What are your thoughts on wings, and Lyndsey? And maybe you can do the next question after that.
Yeah, what I see with 7s with the 6-wing is you're going to get a little bit more of that amplification of the anxiety or fear. And so like, like it's interesting, like actually when I was thinking about the self-preservation 7 that I was talking about, this particular client also had a 6-wing. So also like more worried about performance, right? And very much more like soft, gentle, childlike is a very good way to sort of put that, where I feel like your 7s with 8-wings are like energetic, intense, and kind of playful in there. And so you kind of get a little bit of that dynamic that you're talking about right there as well. But a little bit of amplification of anxiety, a little bit more fear of like apprehension, but they're still extremely playful, extremely open, extremely willing to kind of go anywhere sexually as well. The next question I had is that, how do 7s communicate about sexuality? Like how they let you know if you're interested or if you desire them or you want to move into a sexual encounter. And I thought I'd let Nikki answer that one as far as what that might look like for a 7.
Sure. I'll say two sides. There's college Nikki, and then there's married Nikki, because it's after being together such a long time, it's a little different. But when I was like kind of in the dating scene, it was really kind of like if I was like laser focused on somebody, like that was the person that I found to be the most attractive, or if I wanted to begin a relationship, have sex with somebody, whatever. It was very, I often share that Britney Spears is my spirit animal, but Britney Spears from like the early days, where it was just this very like kind of seductive, sexy, like I would just kind of go in and start dancing or start talking to them. And then it'd be like, so let's, do you want to hang out tonight? So kind of almost like putting myself in a position, and then not outwardly, like I think I saw Misty talking about how she would say like, tell me if you want to have sex with me. That's not really the way that it is for me. It's more through seduction, where it's like you just can't say no. In the early phases of my husband and my relationship, it was like that, and now I'm old and it's a little bit less like that. Now I might just be like, hey, do you want to go have sex? Or I'll share a failed attempt. So my husband was coming back from being in his hometown, and I was like, I'm going to surprise him, and this is going to be a lot of fun. So I put in the middle of our driveway 2 water guns, and I was hiding in the yard without clothing and I had one of the water guns. The other one was there. And there was a note that said, "Come find me." I was watching him giggling, like just super excited about this. He didn't see it, drove right past it, went, how he missed it, I have no idea. But he went back into our camper where we live. And I was like, what? So it was a failed attempt, but that would be a way for me as well to sort of like set it up in a fun way.
That is the most Seven story like I've ever heard. You can just feel like the playfulness, the excitement. You have sorry it didn't work. Like it would, because it sounds like it would have been really fun. So that's a great example of how sevens like might initiate sex. I don't know if that's exactly what you're trying to do, but like it might be a game, it might be tickling or wrestling or chasing. You know, sevens are just really fun and silly a lot of times in their approaches to sexuality. And some of the feedback sevens will give about their partners, depending who they're partnered with, is like, it's not fun enough. It's too serious. It's too heavy. It's like, it's not, where's the play?
Yeah, what I think was interesting that Nikki pointed out too is just that difference between the 8 and 7, right? The 8's like, tell me you want to have sex, get to the point, don't beat around the bush, right? And I think that 7s are a little bit, they're not subtle, but they're not as direct either, right? Like they're not like a 9, like we talked about 9s, and I'm like, no one even knows I'm trying to initiate sex because I'm so subtle. They don't even know that the touching of the arms and looking in your eyes is like, come get me, right? They're not subtle like that, but there's sort of this like, I'm not going to directly come out and say it, but I'm also going to be assertive. And I think that's a really, really great way to say exactly what you brought up, Nikki. Like, I'm telling you what I want, but I'm not telling you what I want, right? Like, it's that playfulness of sort of bringing them in with you as well.
Yeah, and if I could add just one thing to what you both have said. So I have never been the person who like really yearns to make love to somebody. It feels like, I mean, the connection and closeness is important to me, but it almost feels uncomfortable if that like, and kind of weird. Like if somebody's trying to be really sensual with me, I'm like, I don't know. This just got a little weird. So yeah, definitely leaning into the more playful part of things is, and that's not to say I can't or wouldn't make love to my husband, but it's just not the style. And so that is a big call out for me too, that it just feels weird.
And sevens love to laugh. Like if you guys are laughing in bed, like the seven's having a good time. Let's go into another question because we do have a bunch more. So you mentioned about aging. So this is one of the ones we actually got more than one time, different versions of this. But someone was saying, "Oh, my husband, who's in this case was 44, he's worried his good sex years are running out. You know, am I ever going to have good sex again? Is it going to drop off?" Can you speak to that?
Yes. So I think, and in this is probably a little bit more from a sexual 7 perspective, but there's something to be said about like getting comfortable, getting grounded in yourself and in a relationship and just not feeling like I have to peacock so much. So in the beginning of my husband's and my relationship, we had sex a lot. It was, I would wear outfits. I would play Britney Spears and like, it was just about really having a good time. But there gets to a point where I don't feel like I need to do that anymore. Like he's mine, I'm his. Because I do think a part of the 7 sexuality, at least for a sexual 7, is like, okay, this is going to sound terrible, but like landing a catch, right? And once I have it, like I'm good with it and I'm settled. And I think for me, I've also like learned so much about myself through the Enneagram that I do lean into my 5 space, like just sort of being. It doesn't have to be like a production, if that makes sense. But do I think that the best years are behind you? No, I think it's just a different phase that you're going into that might feel different, because when you're having this wild, crazy sex, like that's fun, right? But I think it's about thinking about the new perspective of being just more in yourself, which the 7 struggles with.
I think yeah, was going to say, like, I actually have had this come up a lot, more with men than women, interestingly enough. So it'd be very interesting to see, like, if you took women and men, how both of them are kind of experiencing this as they age. I think in general, like, if we think about it, like, our society sort of tells you that sex is sort of over at like 40 or 50, you know, like you're in a decline once you've hit 40. By the time you're 50 or 60, nobody's having sex anymore. These societal messages that we get around that. And one of the things that I remind people of is that 80-year-olds want to be just as sexual as 20-year-olds. It's our bodies don't function in the ways that they may have functioned before. And so sex becomes oftentimes something different. It might have to be more planful. Like maybe I can't get myself in the positions that I could when I was 25, right? Because my body doesn't bend that way anymore. And so I think it's interesting. But yes, sevens in particular worry about this more, I feel like, than some of the other types I've had come in, especially men. And I don't know why, because it was the week we got this question, I actually had a client in my office say the same thing, that he was afraid that, and this person was 38, that as they were approaching 40, that their sex life was going to be over the minute that he hit 40. And we know that that's not true. I had a 70-year-old couple in my office that was still having great sex. Now, it was more of a production. It was more of a all-day thing because we need different things for sex to happen. But also, like, I just want to say, like, how we define sex too shifts and changes.
So let's see if we can fit maybe two more. It's already almost running out of time. One that I was really interested in to get your perspective, Nikki, is someone said, can we talk about fighting that happens around sex with sevens? Because we're talking about sevens are so lighthearted and playful. It kind of sounds like you never have conflict, but there is. This person in particular said, we've had a lot of fights over the years because she couldn't match his libido and he just assumed that she didn't want to have sex and he would just get angry. So I guess, what advice would you give? What thoughts do you have on sevens getting angry about sex or having, issues around sex? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, the first thing, I don't know if this is going to answer the question, but I do know, we all know that the seven moves to one in stress. And so there is a lot of criticality and there is a lot of good, bad, right, wrong thinking. And so when it comes to that, it's just having that self-awareness and really questioning, like, where is this coming from? Is it true? Do I need to get upset about it? Is the question, and I just want to make sure I'm answering it right, is it from the seven or from the other person in partnership?
It was from the partner saying, why is the anger happening? What can I do about it?
Yeah, and I think it's the same thing, but just from a little different perspective, understanding that your partner is going below the line, right, in their own mental and emotional health. And, that opens up the door for having conversation around it, maybe talking through things. But I do think, again, for myself, before I explored the Enneagram and really like what it meant, that would happen. And it was like a switch, right? You go from being this really jovial, fun person to PISSED, right? And just angry. But that's what I've identified. So compassion, conversation, and for the other person, the seven, to take ownership of that as well.
One thing I would add that I think is really interesting with this too is because sevens are the assertive type. And the reason this came to mind to me is I'm thinking of a 7 and 9 that I have in relationship. And it's like sometimes she takes his intensity as being angry or frustrated with her when it is actually not at all. And so sometimes when we have like our more assertive types in relationship with people, particularly the ones that are more withdrawal types, sometimes there can be some of this interpretation of the intensity being anger, and it isn't actually anger. Like, it's just like I'm intensely sharing my excitement, and the other person interprets it as sort of like, you're angry with me around XYZ. And so I think it's kind of like what Nikki was saying, like that going to that stress point of that one and being more particular and critical and wanting things just a certain way, but as well as sometimes the seven isn't actually even angry. It's just intensity and making sure you understand and know the difference.
Lyndsey, do you have like one last question that was a burning question for you from our followers?
Well, I think one of the questions we had is that somebody was asking if that, will the 7 fully share their desires and wants sexually with them?
Oh boy, that's a big question. I definitely struggle with vulnerability, and because it means that I have to be serious about something. And my husband and I just recently had sex, and I was trying to like verbalize like what I wanted, and it was very hard. So I think it depends on where that person is in their personal growth journey, but vulnerability can be seen as being serious or like disrupting the connection between the two, and I don't want to do that. I don't want the discomfort. I don't want the person to think that I'm weird or crazy or whatever, and then I own that pain and discomfort in that moment. And so sometimes it's easier to just not.
The person that asked is on here, so she just said this was my question. So I bet that was really helpful for her to be able to hear that, Nikki, as well. And I think it's interesting what you're saying, that vulnerability piece, that can be really tough for 7s.
It's interesting because 7s are, sexually assertive in the sense that they can say, oh, let's try this. What about this? More of that. But when it comes to these, what feels really vulnerable, it sounds like it gets much more difficult. So I'm glad you pointed that out, Nikki. We had to wrap up already. I guess like a couple closing notes, because we didn't answer every question. So you can DM us or Nikki if you have more questions. We had people asking about non-monogamy. Are 7s bigger into that? And I'll just say quickly, like more or less, yes, they are, but actually 4s are the most. So 4s are most likely to be trying these like alternative relationships structures, and 7s a little bit less so, but social 7s are, especially, and we see social instinct with polyamory more. And then we got this question: how can we support our 7 partner who may not want to share? So why don't we take like 30 seconds and have Nikki answer that, and then we'll close.
Well, that's a really tough question. I think just let that person kind of come to you, because until I started like digging into this, I didn't have language around why. I didn't know why it was hard, and it felt weird to have the conversation because I already don't know or I don't want to. And so I think just let them sort of be in a space and just hold that space.
And 7s, if you can stay, stay after sex, stay with the afterglow, stay and be, cuddling, touching, intimate after, a lot of emotionality and vulnerability will come up for you if you don't jump out of bed. So that's always my advice for 7s. Lyndsey, do you have any closing moment? And then we'll end.
I was just going to say the piece that you're bringing, Sam, is the growth piece for the 7. And like our ability to do that with a partner that can hold it for us can be so huge. And that recognition of like, I can have emotion, I can have pain, and my partner can sit in, or like positive and negative, like just be in it with us. Like that's just a huge, like sex is one of those ways that we can actually grow. And so for the 7, as we've mentioned before, it's that, what if I just laid in bed and cut a little bit afterwards? What if I just let myself feel the experience that I'm going to have? And I can't believe we are already at the end. This went so quickly. They always do. It was so great to have you, Nikki. I loved your story, by the way. Like, I'm like, gosh, I'm not that creative. And also my 5 husband be like, no way. But how fun is that though too, that engagement of really creating those. And that's what I think I love about 7s, that they bring a lot of creativity to sexuality. I think all of us could learn a little bit about how to bring some creativity from our 7s into our sex lives.
Thank you so much, Nikki. It was so fun. And you did a great job. Gold medal for, waiting till your turn and not getting too excited. It's just, I know how hard that was. Thank you so much.
And then,
Absolutely.
oh, go ahead, Nikki. You said, go ahead.
I just said thank you.
And then next month, we're going to have Enneagram 6 and sexuality. They will be very different than our 7s. But we are looking forward to that. We will be having a special guest, but we don't know who yet. And so when we do know who that is, we will keep you posted. And I think somebody asked about the recording. Yep, we always post these on Instagram after, as well as our YouTube channel. And that way you can access them both. And thank you so much for being here on Sexy First Friday. We look forward to seeing you. I can't believe it's going to be September next month, but we'll look forward to seeing everybody in September as well.
Bye.
Bye.